All right, welcome back. In this episode, we're going to look at hooking up TypeScript into Webpack. TypeScript is JavaScript with some extra commands for using types. Now, types in programming languages is a large topic. Suffice to say, it's defining what kind of data a variable will hold. For example, a string, and it'll throw an error if any lines of code want to change that value to another type, like a number. We'll provide an example in this episode. So getting TypeScript set up will pave the way for hooking up Angular into our Webpack workflow. So we're going to start from where we left off at the end of the reactive development section. If you need the code, it's git checkout hookup. All right, so to get started, let's grab some packages. In the terminal, let's npm install TypeScript and the awesome TypeScript loader. So this should look pretty familiar. Loaders are not very tricky. They follow the same syntax. Now inside of our Webpack dev, let's add an entry point. Let's call it TS. And that'll be pointing to index.ts. Let's create that now. All right, so now down in our loaders, we're going to want to create a new one. It's very much like the JavaScript loader, so let's copy and paste it. Instead of JS, we're going to say TS. We're still going to exclude node modules. In loader, we're going to call the awesome TypeScript loader. All right, and last, let's create a TSConfig JSON file. Now, TSConfig JSON is going to hold a number of options that the TypeScript compiler will use to transpile our code. So it's just a plain object. And the compiler options, we'll go through one at a time, but suffice to say we're setting up for the most common necessary options for TypeScript and Angular. So we want TypeScript to use the module definition pattern of CommonJS. Module resolution describes how TypeScript finds files. So it's going to look in our node modules folder for non-relative paths. Next, we want to describe what we want the transpiler to target, meaning what is its final code going to look like. In our case, we want it to look like ES5 code. Next, we want to allow JavaScript files to be included in our TypeScript as well. The lib option is telling TypeScript to load certain libraries before it starts its transpilation. So ES5 and 6 and the DOM libraries are going to be necessary to complete transpilation. So it's kind of an automatic load these libraries first. Source map true is just going to allow it to use source maps. And finally, experimental decorators and emit decorator metadata. That's both true. Angular uses decorators, and TypeScript might change it in the future, so it'll throw a warning if we don't have these. Lastly, outside of the compiler options, I'm going to set an option for Atom, which is my code editor. So it uses my TSConfig and doesn't attempt to use its own. So add that option if you're using Atom. Okay, so we're finally ready to write some TypeScript code. So in index.ts, let's make a new function. You can see immediately we're getting linting information. Which goes away when we've completed our definition. You can see that there's autocomplete here, and we're able to tab to complete. TypeScript understands what these are and is giving us little helpful tooltips along the way. So our function is pretty simple. It takes a greeting and it logs it to the console. So let's use that function down here. So you can see all we're doing is creating a function and calling it at the end. Now, first thing you'll notice is that TypeScript looks exactly the frickin' same as regular JavaScript, except for one thing. our argument, greeting, has a colon string. Now that's one of a bunch of types that TypeScript supports. The native types, if you will. Now you can also build your own types, but that's outside of the scope of this lesson. So let's spin up our dev server and see what we get. We can see the TypeScript file is included. That's good. And it's outputted as a bundle. And in our console, we see hello TypeScript. You can also see it's index.ts, which is pretty great because of source mapping and that one little option and Webpack's power. We have the original TypeScript right here. All right, cool. So what happens when we break it? So let's add another function. Greeting 1, 2, 3. So you see right off the bat we have a linter error inside the Atom IDE. And that's because I'm using the TypeScript package to compile everything as I type it. Inside the browser you see we have an error. Argument of type 123 is not assignable to parameter of type string. It's a pretty good error. I mean, it tells you exactly what the issue is. It also appears in the console. So we have it in the overlay, the console, and right in your IDE. All three things telling you, hey, this is not how we're supposed to program this function, and it's not going to run unless you change this. In this lesson, we got TypeScript working in Webpack and showed that typing errors bubbling up to the overlay screen. And TypeScript is a bigger subject, with syntax to set up more kinds of types. If you need the final code, check out Hookup TypeScript Final. In the next lesson, we're going to continue down the TypeScript track and hook up the latest version of AngularJS. See you there.